So we're going to be talking today about the new CMS edit that changes some billing requirements affecting toxicology, presumptive, and definitive coding. So we're going to jump into that just as a way of introduction. We are Lighthouse Lab Services. We're a solutions provider here for clinical diagnostic laboratories. And my name is John Harrell, and I'm the president of Lighthouse Lab Services. Founded Lighthouse 20 years ago next month, so we're celebrating that soon. And I have Ann Lambrick, our VP of RCM Solutions, with us today, who's an expert on all things laboratory billing related, and is going to help us get into the weeds on that. So a little bit about the process here, the housekeeping. To reduce your chances of buffering, close down any apps that you have in the background. If you're having a hard time hearing us or getting some frame error rate, check your connection speed as well. The webinar will be recorded. It's our most common question that we're asked every time. You don't have to do anything. It'll automatically be sent to you. You'll get a link to that recording. There are questions. There's a slide at the very end to do some Q&A, and we anticipate a robust Q&A period today. However, you are able to ask questions throughout the webinar by using the panel on the right side screen, the Q&A function, and we will try to address those. They may be addressed during the webinar. Otherwise, we'll get to the ones that we can at the end. And we may run some polls, so keep an eye out for that. We encourage you to participate and provide feedback, so we make sure that we're hearing from you as well. And there are some handouts. You'll see on the right side, there's some handouts that provide more information, including some information about our take on this topic and some NILA efforts on this issue. So we're going to go ahead and get started. A little bit about Lighthouse. We do provide multiple different solutions for clinical diagnostic labs, including revenue cycle management consulting, which is where we're going to be focused today. So if you ever do need assistance or have questions, we'd love to be a partner for you there. We do revenue cycle management audits, so your billing company is doing a good job. We don't do billing ourselves, so we're independent there and not looking to replace any billing company, but we do like to go through and just make sure that we're an extra set of eyes to make sure things are being done correctly and you're not leaving any money on the table. So if we can be helpful with that, please reach out, let us know. We also provide staff recruiting services, LDT validation services, medical directors, and full lab setup and management, if we can be helpful. Today, we're going to be talking about this new CMS edit. It dropped on July 1st, and it's affecting the toxicology billing codes, the 80305, 6, and 7s, as well as the G codes. And they are basically changing the way that it's being paid out and making it so you're only going to get paid for one of those, at least in the short term. And we're going to bring in Ann Lambrick, who's going to talk to us a little bit about the specifics of how the mechanics of that work, what that means for you in your lab, and what you can do to try to navigate this, kind of provide some paths and feedback on what other laboratories are doing as they tackle this issue. So I'll go ahead and I'll introduce Ann Lambrick, our VP of RCM Services.
Thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending this webinar. I know it's a very hot topic. Hopefully you get some really good information here that will help provide some direction on next steps for you, and also perhaps give you some assurance that it's not all doom and gloom. We do see some positive movement to some potential changes here. So we'll talk further on that later in the slides. So let's just kind of quickly high level discuss edits and the overview of what's happened here. So Medicare added an edit to their system. So July 1st, an edit was added that basically states that they will not allow for both the presumptive and the definitive drug test to be performed on the same patient for the same day. So it's what's called an NCCI edit. I know we have many billing companies or individuals that are familiar with billing that understand NCCI edit. It's not a new thing. An NCCI edit, depending on what it gives guidance to the payer. It's a kind of a system guidance of how to process the claim. So an edit was added stating that these two services are mutually exclusive. And I wanted to define mutually exclusive for everyone. It means that Medicare stating these codes are not, it's not reasonable to perform them in the same session. So again, we know it's reasonable. We know that it is, and I think because of all the pushback, Medicare did walk this back. Initially, they had indicated that this edit could not be overridden with a modifier. They've walked it back and said, all right, wait, whoops, we're going to keep the edit, but we're going to allow for you to submit with a modifier to override the edit. So great, but that's not effective. We're not going to update that until October 1st. Ugh. So what do we do from now until October 1st? That's one of the questions we hope to answer today, as well as going forward. What are some strategies behind, how to, these edits and rules are not going to be new. You're not going to, this is not a one-time thing. So what are we going to do going forward? So as I mentioned, right now, as of October 16th, the edit cannot be overridden with a modifier. That change will be implemented October 1st. And so what Medicare has advised is we'll put this change in October 1st, and then we're going to retro back those changes to July 1st. So that means if you are billing claims now, and if you're adding the modifier, the appropriate modifier, then optimally October 1st, the payer is going to start reprocessing claims and paying back to July 1st with the next quarterly update. So again, that's the good news, is that the modifier will allow for payment. The bad news is that currently from July 1 to October 1st, even if you're adding the modifier, you will not see any retro reimbursement. It will go back to July 1st, but not until, again, I keep saying this, but not until October 1st and after will you start seeing those reprocessed claims. Sorry, there we go. So again, this went into effect on July 1st, and so we've spoken with various labs to kind of understand how they're currently responding. And these are some things that they're currently doing, and it is also outlined in the NCCI edit, the updates of what labs can do. And so you can bill the two codes, the presumptive and the definitive test, as you have been doing. You can bill them. And what we would advise is that you're going to need to add the modifier so that when October 1st comes, that the payer will then retro back to reprocess the claims to allow for both those codes to be paid for the same patient the same day. So you can bill currently. You don't need to stop billing, but just understand, even if you add the modifier, the claim will still be denied. My understanding is that it will be the definitive code that will deny, because again, that is the code that is got the edit added to it. You can wait to submit your claims, which I don't think, optimally, we'll talk about this a little bit as far as the logistics of this and operationally, like on the back end, what we're going to have to expect. If you're able to wait to submit your claims with the appropriate modifier until after October 1st, that's going to be the cleanest and probably the easiest on the back end for your billing teams to avoid all the recoupments and the reprocess of claims. There's also an option where you can use the MAC appeal process, and this is really, if you are able to support this with your personnel, this is an option that potentially can get you paid now on both codes, but you will need to bill and then appeal the denial with documentation to support medical necessity. So I want to get a little bit into the modifier, because I see all kinds of questions on the modifier. Appropriate modifier utilization. So As we said, the good news is that Medicare is going to allow for the modifier to bypass the edit. What I want everyone to understand is for this particular edit, the modifier indicates that these services were medically necessary. So remember when I stated that the edit is mutually exclusive, meaning that Medicare says, well, these two codes cannot be reasonably performed in the same session. So if you add a modifier to indicate that both codes, it was medically necessary to perform both in the same session, your documentation will need to be able to support this. So you do not typically submit documentation upfront to a payer. So, you're submitting CPT codes, you're going to submit the modifier, you're going to submit your charge and diagnosis code that typically goes through the payer electronically through a clearinghouse. When you utilize this modifier, it is telling the payer in their system that we've determined that it was medically necessary to do both the presumptive and the definitive test for this patient. And so if the payer comes back and asks you to support that, that's where we would advise to make sure that you have documented, reason to have done both. The testing needs to support patients' clinical need and aid in providers' decision making. This really is nothing that's changed. We would always recommend that your documentation should support the services billed. That is patient care 101, billing 101. However, I just want to make sure it's clear. This modifier specifically states that it's medically necessary. You're overriding the edit, saying that you shouldn't, that it's not medically reasonable, and you're saying that it is. So we highly advise that this is something that you review with your internal compliance, your billing compliance department, as well as if you utilize a third-party biller, your biller should really be providing some guidance on this as well. The other thing that I think is important to really discuss and address today is that Medicare, with their NCCI edits, set the stage for other payers to follow suit. So from our experience, most payers will follow NCCI edits, and I believe we are finding that other labs are seeing denials similar, where the non-Medicare patients are denying as well. They've adopted these edits. So we would expect expect not only for them to adopt the edit, but we'd also expect them to allow for the use of the modifier. This is something that I'm going to talk a little bit further, but it's important to be able to track and trend this on the back end, with denial reports, so that you're able to effectively manage this. The unknown at this point is whether or not all these payers will retro back to July 1st. Again, this is going to be something that will have to be monitored. And each payer, it may be unique, where it may be to the point where you will have to appeal and work with that payer to have them retro those denials back to July 1st, as Medicare has said that they will do. As I've stated, ongoing, making sure that you're evaluating this ongoing, that you have the appropriate tools in place to capture these denials, effectively manage and be able to communicate to the various payers. Again, either through appeal strategy or working with provider relations to have them adopt similar rules as Medicare is stating. We did point out laboratories. If you look at existing LCDs or proposed LCDs as a guide for education, things that they're looking for. I think on a previous slide it talked about avoid the appearance of reflex testing. It's important. So again, using these tools, which I would say your LCD is a good outline of what the payer is really looking at as far as medical necessity. I'm just looking at all the questions coming in, so we will address here shortly. All right, looking ahead, it's important to understand, as I've mentioned previously, this is one issue of potentially many. It is something that we need to understand, that the good news with this particular issue is that most likely this will be walked back, and this will be, there's some administrative burden here, that um, you'll need to understand what your unique circumstance is, and how to best address this. But the good news is that there's a path forward for payment. um, but these various challenges, and again, not unique to toxicology, it is across the board in healthcare as far as billing and collecting. One of the things that is important is to make sure that you understand appropriate utilization, you understand medical necessity, you understand the importance of, um, what is the payer looking for when it comes to ensuring payment, reimbursement for the testing and the services that you're providing. Um, we talked, I think, a couple months ago. We had a webinar on preparing for audits. And one of the things that we mentioned is that payers are using, they're utilizing technology to identify overutilization, to identify trends that will put you at a potential risk of them coming in, auditing, and potentially doing takebacks. One of the concerns here is just making sure, again, this is why, I don't feel comfortable providing a blanket answer on, the the appropriate modifier to use on a webinar, because the the use of this modifier, as I mentioned, is telling the payer that this service is medically reasonable. And so they a payer, when you're using this modifier, it's a flag, and they will potentially audit. So although there is a path forward, and again, the good news is that this is a hiccup, so to speak, and it's a challenge for laboratories. It is causing a lot of distress because of financial implications. However, really long term, I just want to make sure that it is evaluate your process, your internal process is evaluated, and in making sure that there is appropriate utilization, that you are fine tuning your processes internally with the ordering physicians. There's education back, and you're protecting yourself, really. And that's where a lot of times it's like it is difficult because the laboratory is the go is the in between. However, there is liability there. So I just want to make sure it's clear. Um, it is use of modifiers, especially the particular modifier that most likely will be utilized here, will be potential flags for audit. Um, you know, eh, we talked about an increase in outsourced third-party billing, third-party auditing vendors. These payers will hire outsourced vendors to come in and audit. They look at documentation, et cetera. And again, it's this continued burden on the laboratory to have to facilitate these responses. So just again, we want to be aware of these things. When we talk about utilizing partners such as Lighthouse, I'm going to kind of briefly talk about what we do. On my team is the Revenue Cycle Management Solutions team, and we work with laboratories all over the country. We work with physician groups and laboratories, and really, the goal is to be that source for you to work with your internal team, or even your billing vendor. So many of the laboratories we work with, use third-party biller, and we work very closely with those billing vendors to make sure that, like we talked about, that there's effective tools to ensure that these issues, like this NCCI edit, is tracked. So if we decide that, option one, and we're gonna continue to submit claims, and we're gonna add the modifier, how does billing track this and identify it? This is going to be, I think this is going to be on the back end. It's going to be a huge issue come October 1st. We're going to be having to figure out, we've been billing for the last 3 months. So how do we track and make sure that payments are coming through, that the payers are reprocessing, and what next steps are needed if the payer is not doing what they said that they were going to do? How does billing effectively communicate to the appropriate parties at the labs that say, hey, we're not getting paid from Aetna. What should we do now? Or we're suggesting we're going to escalate this up, and these are the things that we can do to help support you, laboratory. Or if you're using internal billing, we support internal billing teams to make sure that we can take the lead here. We can address this for multiple clients. So, like I said, we partner with you, and we partner with your billing solution to make sure that you're providing that effective revenue cycle, your goals, and again, these types of issues that come through that are addressed and responded to accordingly for your unique situation. How do we plan ahead? How do we make sure that on the back end, things are getting resolved? How do we track and trend? And that's some of the things that we do. And really, I highly stress, we've been asked many, since this went into effect, we've had a lot of questions from clients, and we are certainly able to help. And like I said, we will definitely go through some of these questions that are coming through. But I point to your billing partner, and I also point to your internal compliance team to be aware of these changes, and to be able to sit down with you and help understand and guide you on these changes. And we know of many billing partners that do that. And again, internally, you should have individuals that are able to work internally to make sure that these changes are addressed, and that you have, again, effective strategy to address. And I know we'll talk about our RCM Spotlight platform as well. Here, I think, John, I'm passing it over to you. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. So here's just a screenshot of that. This is a tool that we use. We're giving it away free to try out. Anybody that's on this webinar, you can click the next step here button below, and we will have someone reach out to you. It provides a dashboard. So most of the bigger billing companies are providing this to their customers only. And so we provided the solution, or developed the solution, as a tool for labs that are not of size to be a customer for maybe some of the really big billing companies, but still want that functionality and dashboard to be able to see all their denials. So it makes it really simple to see your denials. You'll be able to sort and filter and slice a million different ways, so you can see which ones were denied, which ones you use your modifier on, and quantify that and set it up for refiling. So if you're interested, click that button, and we will have someone reach out. We are giving away our CM Spotlight for free to anybody that's on the webinar that wants to try it out. And you'll at least get a report and a dashboard for everything you have now. If you wanted to use it ongoing monthly as an active dashboard, we can go over the cost of that, but we'll go ahead and give you a snapshot of everything right now, so you'll get some value there for sure. That's one tool. Another thing we do is our RCM audits, right? So it's hard to know. I think most labs depend on their billing company telling them they're doing a good job. And of course, there's a little bit of a inherent conflict of interest to trust the group that you're hiring to determine whether they are doing a good job. So we'll come through and just look at what's happening with your billing. And it might not even be that they're doing a bad job, but there might be room for improvement, or we might be able to find things that are able to capture you a little bit more revenue. We do benchmark across your peers too. So you're able to see how you compare by claim and by billing code compared to the rest of the industry on collection. And we might be able to identify areas where we can help. We have our payer strategy solutions team, which helps get labs in network as well. And so, if it is a certain payer that is causing an issue and we have a good solution for that, we'll connect you with it. It might be that we'll connect you with another laboratory that already has a solution in place for that. So, let us know. The other thing I want to talk about though was advocacy. So, this change, maybe it was a mistake by CMS. Maybe it's indicative of a bigger pressure being put on trying to make it difficult to get paid for toxicology billing, right? It's become always a challenge. It's always one of those tall poppies that there's headwinds in trying to make money in toxicology. And I think that'll continue to be the case. I think that we can be reactive and just fight all these billing changes and fight with payers. And it's been a losing battle for many years. I think it would be really good if we could lock arms as an industry and advocate for the vital importance of toxicology testing and therapeutic drug testing for the opioid crisis. I put a quote on there. I didn't realize that I was going to be quoting myself on this slide, but it looks like my team threw one on there about fentanyl, and that I put out the other day on LinkedIn. Number one killer in America of adults between 18 and 45. Major issue. We're part of that solution. I think we need to be part of that narrative and tell the story of what toxicology labs are doing and the important role that they play in making sure that drug testing is being done correctly and therapeutic drugs are being administered correctly and not abused. I'm pushing out here also NILA. It's the National Independent Lab Association, has some advocacy efforts here. They have lobbyists that they work with that can advocate for these issues, and they're putting together a letter to circulate, and they're looking for other labs that might be interested in signing on for that. So if you're interested in joining that cause and signing on, showing your endorsement for the importance of lab testing and just having NILA advocate for your lab as well through the appropriate channels, go ahead and sign on to that, because I think the more we can demonstrate that value, the less that we're going to have these fights over reimbursement and dollars. So now we're going to move into questions, and I know we've got a lot of them. It's been pretty robust. We'll do our best. We'll asterisk it that we can't just give blanket answers. Everybody's situation is a little bit different. We're not going to just tell everyone go blanket use a modifier on all of these, because there's medical necessity concerns that we need to think about. But we will do our best here to field some of these questions and get some information to you guys. So
And I want to quickly, because I can see most, like the modifier question, I just want to address this, because I'm going to say it's not just the medical necessity, but it's going to be the payer, everyone. I like, unfortunately, there may be 2 or 3 modifiers that are going to be applicable, and this like creates even more challenge, and why we, if you need help with this, it's going to be a separate, call to discuss specifically like what your best strategy is here. As I've mentioned, if you're using a biller, your biller should be able to provide you guidance on what modifier should be used, or test a few. I've seen multiple where there's multiple comments and questions about modifier utilization. You can see it's not a blanket answer.
correct.
Thanks for providing that clarity, Ann. I think one other one that I think we could speak to here is a little bit more information about obtaining medical necessity information to support the claims when they're submitted. A lot of times labs don't get all that info up front. So what is the best way to approach that?
It really is going to, I hate to keep saying this, but like I'm curious to see, so there's 2 different things. Number one, if we're appealing with documentation up front, so you're billing both presumptive and definitive, you're adding the modifier, you get it denied, and then you're appealing with your supporting documentation. I always go, supporting documentation should support the medical necessity of the test. So it's going to include, it's not just the requisition. It's not just the final result. It should include the patient chart or the notes from the ordering that to indicate the why behind the order. Why is the need for this test or both of these tests to be performed for this patient on the same day? And to me, the 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 best documentation that you can provide to the payer to support that is the medical record, the patient's medical record. Um, so again, submitting with just the requisition to show that you performed the order, that it's not, it wouldn't, to me, justify medical necessity here. And that's the same on, again, if you're audited. So let's say, October 1st, our understanding is this edit will will be updated to allow for the modifier to override the edit. And the modifier there it depends on the payer what they're looking for, but up until October 1st, it doesn't matter if you bill with the modifier. You will get denied. So I just want to see these questions, so I'm just going to answer multiple. That you will get denied October 1st. They will then retro back to July 1st. They'll allow for the modifier and then reprocess claims. So I would expect that there will be some reprocessing. Again, it's not October 1st, so we don't know yet, but this is what I expect. July 1st or October 1st and after, we'll start seeing reprocessing of claims that were submitted July 1st and after with the modifier. So we mentioned in the webinar that utilization of a modifier to override an edit for mutually exclusive could be a trigger or a red flag to a payer. Overutilization could be something to a payer that says, I want to make sure that that modifier is truly being used appropriately. So I just want to make sure everybody is clear. That doesn't mean like a payer is going to audit you. Like, and we talked about this a couple months ago. Most likely at some point you're going to be audited. The important part is to think about proactively, how do I ensure that when I do get audited, I come away with a clean bill. Again, if you're in an audit with Medicare and they're saying, hey, provide me documentation, using just the requisition and the results is not enough to support medical necessity. So making sure that you're strategic about and there's thought, a well supportive packet that is a well supported packet that is submitted to the payer to support medical necessity, and that would include medical records, patient charts, etc.
Thanks for the clarity there, Ann. I think we can knock out a couple more pieces of low-hanging fruit here. Do you anticipate any fee reduction when you submitting and billing with the modifier?
No, I do not. As I've mentioned, NCCI edits are nothing new. And the fact that they're allowing for the modifier, we see this, we work with many pathology groups and there are edits, and similar circumstances, modifiers apply to support and there's no reduction in the reimbursement.
Thanks.
We see no implication of that.
Perfect.
I think another one that maybe is good to grab is there's some questions on, if you bill both, and especially if it's two different labs. So if a screening lab was to bill for the presumptive and a reference out to another laboratory for the definitive, and they both bill it, who's going to get paid? So I don't know if you want to weigh in on that answer.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna. I appreciate that question, John. I think that what I would expect is that when we submit claims to a payer, it gets in their system, and so they like I said, there's edits. It's behind the scenes. It's like a programming logic, and so if you're billing, even if it's not you billing both, they get a claim with the 80307, and they've got a claim with the G0481. Regardless of who's billing it, it's going to hit that edit and it will deny the second one that's submitted. So whatever gets in first is going to pay.
Yep. And
So
that was my point there.
Yeah.
Something actionable to take away from this is the timeliness of of processing your claims could affect how often you're getting paid. So if you're
Mhm.
a lab doing a lot of definitive testing, getting your claims in early could mean that you're going to have more likelihood of getting paid versus getting denied. Of course, you are going to have to deal with potential fallout from your customer or physician office lab that might be doing the screening, who's going to get the denial. But that's your business decision to make. But to know that timeliness does play in here.
Yeah, and I've again, that is a strategy I believe that many labs are taking, and I think that again, if that makes best business sense to you, um, I just want to consider um, October 1st. If you've billed for these tests, like it doesn't matter as of October 1st, it's not going to matter who's billing as long as that. Uh, It really, I believe it's going to be the definitive test that's going to require the modifier. If you've billed that with the modifier, I believe it should override the edit and you should get paid. So it's really like just strategy from now or July 1st till October 1st. This is what we need to do to keep, you know, revenue stable. And again, when we think revenue stable, we also need to think like, all right, what's this going to look like as far as it's going to be a nightmare on the back end as of October 1st, because when they go back and reprocess, they'll most likely recoup anything that they paid on previously in the reissue payment. So if we're getting paid on the presumptive and then expect that the definitive will be processed after October 1st, it's going to be that um, reallocation of money is that it's just going to be a mess on the back end with your finance team and how they're allocating payments. This is again from July 1 to October 1st is like I feel like it's one strategy. I saw someone had asked, will claims need to be appealed or will Medicare reprocess? My understanding is that as of October 1st, they'll retro back. In my mind, in my experience, that means they will just go back and reprocess if you submitted the claim with the appropriate modifier to override the edit. Um, you know, that's why I think it's important if you're billing and understand, like if you're billing both codes, making sure that you have that edit from July 1, I'm sorry, the modifier from July 1 to October 1, making sure that you add that modifier. And then if you're planning on or you're expecting the payer to reprocess the claims after October 1st, or if you are getting a denial and then you can appeal it from that period of July 1 to October 1st. You don't have to wait for them to retro back. You can appeal it. And my understanding is get paid. When? I don't know. But that is what they indicate in their guidance, in the NCCI guidance. You can appeal and it'll be up to the individual max to reprocess and pay. And that is July 1 to October 1. October 1 and after, my understanding is that they're going to go back to July 1 and reprocess those claims. Is everybody
So
like,
I think
it's so confusing.
And I think also the decision that labs need to weigh here then is the administrative burden of an appeal
Yes.
versus the challenge of that cash flow pinch of waiting till October 1st, right? So
Right.
that's the business decision is, do we go through the administrative hurdles to try to get an appeal in to maybe get dollars in the door a little bit quicker? Or do we wait till October 1st to get the same number of dollars, maybe a little bit easier, but having to
Right.
delay that or kick it down the road? So those are, and not to say that either of those answers are right in a blanket way for everybody, but that's
Right.
the decision that you as a lab decision maker have.
Yep. And again, we can provide guidance if you have questions or you're unable, again, to kind of ask these unique questions. You need someone with that kind of industry expertise. We certainly can provide guidance. I just want to again caution the blanket guidance because it's going to be different for each lab, unfortunately. Again, going back to another strategy, the creative billing, like holding one charge versus the other, again, that's something that potentially you can do. However, I think like thinking operationally on the back end. And I know I talk front end, back end a lot, but back end, I mean, with the denials and the reprocessing of claims and managing that effectively, I think is something to consider. It will get you paid on the one test, but if you're going to be rebilling the other test after October 1st, it doesn't just mean that they pay the one test. It could mean that they reprocess, they do a take back and then reprocess. The unfortunate thing right now is we're kind of in a waiting period to see what the payers are going to do, and I expect that this will be a mess. I do want to make sure it's clear though, like, the concern is getting paid, right? So I feel that you will get paid. It's just the delay in payment and the administrative burden that this is really posing for labs.
Yeah, and I think some other strategies I've heard that maybe it'd be worth talking about a little bit, that I don't think are real effective. One of them being to try and have a different date of service for both. I think, and feel free to weigh in here. But by putting a different date of service, you would, I mean, first of all, it would need to be accurate, and you might need to have the patient, because the data collection is data service. You'd have to have the patient come back, which I don't think is real reasonable to see them on different days. And so I think that's probably a problem. The other strategy being to just bill for the higher paying test, the definitive, to get paid now, and not bill for the presumptive. I think that there's some payers that are going to deny the going straight to a definitive without a
Right,
presumptive.
exactly. Yep.
So,
I 100% agree. And that's why it's difficult for these questions to be a blanket answer, simply because like like there are each challenge or um each path that might be recommended will also bring in a unique set of challenges that you need to be aware of and understand and be prepared for. So that's why we recommend working this out internally with your billing compliance team, partnering with your billing vendor. Many billing vendors that we work with have a billing compliance team as well as providing some really good consultative advice on strategy here, what they're working on with other clients. And again, we can also support that as needed. I know you mentioned, John, the issue with having a patient come back. Nyla did mention this in their letter. And I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. That's one of the things that they're addressing, is just like this is a challenge that they're pushing onto the patient. Like, it's just not reasonable or industry norm to expect that the patient's going to come back for a different test. And so, I encourage all of you, if you are NILA members, to look at that letter and make sure that you're um, um, adding your name to the list so that they can push this through. Because this would be, I hope, hopefully a permanent fix where maybe they uh, just get away from the edit. That would be the best case scenario.
and that letter, again, can be found in the handout section for any of you guys that are looking to reference it. You'll also find all the slide deck from today's slides are there. And you can click the sign up here if you're interested in kind of locking arms with NILA there to sign on to a letter that they will use when they're going with lobbyists to try to fight for this on the Hill.
All right. I think unless there's any other questions you want to touch on, Anne, we've been pretty comprehensive, and we'll wrap it up.
No, I appreciate everybody's time today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, guys. We know it's a complicated one, and I know everybody wants super clear, definitive answers. It's a little bit gray, but we would love to speak with you further about the specifics of your situation if you still have questions. Thank you for attending, and we look forward to talking to you next month.